What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 22. Really excited to have Jason Puckley, aka at SINCITYBARTENDER on TikTok and at the SINCITYBARTENDER. Jason has a unique and fun approach to presenting cocktails that has caught the eyeballs of people worldwide, as he sports over 1.1 million followers on TikTok and over 68K on IG. Blending his passion for pop culture and mixology into amazing concoctions that you instantly want to make and try on your own. I've done that myself. I originally found Jason through my FYP in May of 2020 when I remember this. It was his PB&J shot and also his Radaway drink, and I've been a fan ever since. He's probably single-handedly tripled the sales of Blue Curacao. I didn't even know what luster dust was until I saw one of his posts. But hailing from Cleveland, Ohio, and leading the forefront on the war against sobriety, Jason Puckley, aka at SINCITYBARTENDER, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Phil. Great intro.
For sure. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your background for a bit. You're not a Vegas resident. What ultimately led you to moving to LV?
Honestly, so when I first turned 21, I was still living at home, and I decided, I had been currently going to college, and it's like, this really isn't for me. I just want to get out of my house. I want to, be living my life. And so I moved to Columbus, Ohio, just to be a server, hang out with friends. They have a really good college crowd down there, so a lot of young people. And so I was serving, and I'm like, I want to make more money. Why am I not bartending? So I began bartending, and that really took off for me. And I was like, why am I bartending in Ohio? Where can I make more money bartending? And so I ended up looking at, I really want to go down south. I wanted somewhere warmer, but it was still so humid. So I'm like, where could be better? I'm like, oh, Vegas, like Vegas bartenders. It's iconic. So why not become one of them? And so I picked up my stuff like 2 years later and moved to Vegas.
That's great. And then I'm sure, to make that jump, to make that move, make that decision, a lot of your friends and family maybe thought you were crazy.
Yeah, so my mom, I remember I was here in Vegas and I told her, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be looking at apartments. And she's like, okay, have fun. And I text her like a couple hours later and I'm like, okay, I just signed a lease. And she's like, for what? And I'm like, for an apartment, I'm moving here. And she's like, oh, I thought that was a joke. And so I was kind of inspired by my sister. When she graduated college, she moved to Salt Lake. Now she lives in Seattle, actually. So she moves all over the place. And I'm like, well, hey, if she can do it, why can't I? And so it was tough, moving somewhere, having no friends or family, but, I made a lot along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I did the same thing. I moved here without knowing anyone. And
yeah, people are like, you're crazy for doing that. And I'm like, well, if you want something, you're going to do it,
Totally. So you moved to Vegas, and then what was your first gig out here?
I was actually just a bartender at Brio over in Town Square. You might have been over there. And I mean, that was, it was a job. And that's actually all I really had time for. In February of 2020, I had just had an interview over at Jing in downtown Summerlin. I don't know if you've been there, but it's a great vibe to it. It's like an upscale cocktail bar as well as food. And yeah, it was so funny. I was talking with the owner and he's like, yeah, as long as this COVID doesn't get out of hand, this is going to be great. And yeah, so ever since then, I've just been bartending at home.
Cool. And then that's actually when you started on TikTok in late February 2020.
Yeah.
And was that out of boredom basically, or?
So it was actually really funny. One of my best friends out here, he told me to get on TikTok in it was like July or August of 2019. He's like, yeah, it's going to be the next app. And I'm like, I don't post anything on my Instagram. How am I going to start posting videos? Like, that just doesn't seem like something I do. And so he kind of was egging me on for a while. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to do it. And then in February, he's like, hey, can you make rainbow shots? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And he's like, let's make a video. And I'm like, okay. So we spent like 2 hours filming my first TikTok video, which was just rainbow shots. And he's like, as soon as we get this is going to be great. And so we filmed that, another one, and they both just took off. I think my second video had like over 700,000 in the first day. And I'm like, is it this easy? Like, I'm gonna keep doing this. So that was how I got started on there.
That's awesome. A shout out to your friend for pushing you to do that. That's amazing. And what's interesting to me is kind of the format is I mean, basically, I mean, there's been improvements and you've evolved, but it's kind of the same how to make it.
Yeah, it's been pretty core. I don't vary too much. Personally, I don't like being in the spotlight all that much. I've definitely gotten used to it. But when I was first making TikToks, my friend would be like, you got to be in these videos. And I'm like, really? Like, let's not. And so at first I shifted out of that, and then I shifted back into it as I started enjoying it more and more. But yeah, I just kind of got down a rhythm where I could knock out all these without having to do wardrobe changes every day or every hour, you know?
Right. And then when did it actually hit you that this was more than you just posting drinks? When did it become beyond that?
It was probably in May. My page really, really took off. I think so. Sometime in April, I got a little bit of traction. I had a couple of videos go viral, and I was at like 70 or 80,000 followers. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. You know, I'm having fun during quarantine. It was really just to do something. And then in May, I just started getting like, it was like 100,000 each week of May. And all these companies started reaching out to me like, hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do that? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I text my friend, I'm like, I should charge for this, right? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, but I don't know how much to charge. Like, and he's like, he really helped me with a lot of it. He's really good with business and all that. So I'm like, hey, I guess this can be a job.
Yeah, unbelievable. And everyone's just on their phones at home at that time. I mean, I know my wife and I were drinking daily. So,
yeah.
So
it's funny. There were a couple times where I was making cocktails, and when I first started, I was finishing every drink. I would make just 3 a day because what was I doing tomorrow? Nothing. What was I doing the next day? Nothing. Like, I didn't have to plan ahead. There was nothing to do. And so I'd usually drink 3 drinks a day. And then as I started, batching them more and more, I'm like, I still got to finish these. And finally I realized I can't live that way.
Right.
I was like, this isn't casual anymore when you're making, 20, 25 drinks a day.
So, I mean, the body of work to me, I mean, I see you scroll through it all and it's truly outstanding and awe-inspiring. Let's talk a little bit about the process. I mean, you're dutifully posting pretty much at least twice a day, right?
Yeah, twice a day is my bare minimum, I'd say. Ideally, it would be 3, but sometimes, life just gets busy.
Sure. And then so when the actual process of the inspiration to concept to shooting the video, I mean, how does that work for you initially when you're thinking about the drinks?
So I would say it's like a weekly thing for me. Usually on Monday, I'm like, hey, let's start thinking of what drinks are on the horizon. I always have a notepad, or not a notepad, but a notes app. And if I see anything while I'm just out, like if I'm at Target, I see a Lego set that looks awesome, or a popular character, any ad on TV, I'm like, maybe that'd be a cool drink. If someone comments something, hey, maybe that would be cool. And so I just kind of stockpile all these broad ideas, slowly narrow it down to what's trending, what's popular right now, like what would really, catch someone's attention. And then, can I make it look cool? Can I make it taste good? And so it really is just slowly like a round of trials where I'm like, these could all work, but what could really work? What's definitely going to work? And the amount of videos I have that I just have unedited footage, at this point I should probably just delete, but it's crazy to see what turns into something else. Sometimes I start with a different idea for a cocktail and it ends up looking like something entirely different, but I have to change the ingredients for lore purposes or something, and I have to make it really fit that theme.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to me. And then, how much trial and error is there? How many drinks do you make that don't make it on?
It definitely goes better than you'd think. I'd say probably if I have an idea written down, I understand the layering that I want for the cocktails usually. I usually understand the taste. So I'd say at least 7 out of 10 make it, but unfortunately more fail than I would like to. There's just been, I can't recall any current concepts. Probably, I really want to make a fun shot for Venom, and this was actually last summer. He's always been a favorite character of mine. And I think that was one of the longest processes because I'm like, how can I get, you know, sick looking, but still tasty, but black, white, and blue cocktail that really says Venom. And it took me the longest time, but you know, when it finally came through, it was a really popular video, so I was happy with it.
Yeah, and Venom's just such an amazing character.
Yeah, so he'll definitely be making another appearance on my page soon here.
Very cool. Yeah, and I talk to people who do cooking videos, and a lot of that stuff, you know, is trial and error. If the dough doesn't rise, you know, the next day or anything, that whole video is trashed.
See, fortunately for me, at maximum, one of my cocktail videos probably takes, you know, 15 minutes at the most. That's if I'm blending something, doing this and that. But, you know, a cooking video, that could, you know, if you don't get it right in the first 2 tries, you're probably going to have to quit it because you've been spending your whole day on that and you need to produce some, you know, viable content.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when shooting, are you doing like 7 at a time or just whenever inspiration hits?
I'm probably, I want to say I do 35 a day when I do shoot.
Right.
I knock out a lot of cocktails. Yeah. I try and do, over the summer, I was getting a lot more done. In the past couple of weeks, I've had like family visit and all that. And I'm like, man, I like to have a stockpile of like 60 videos. Like that's where my drafts, I would like them to be. So if for whatever reason I went on a, you know, 2-3 week long vacation, I'd be fine. So I always try and do like 35 a week just in one day. And then editing is the entire next day. So it's a process.
Yeah. But I mean, the work you put in is totally paid off.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see what's going to happen. The evolution of your posts have been really cool to see as well. I mean, from the graphics to the editing and the mic you're using. Can you talk to me a bit about that process and if there's some things you have in mind for future posts?
So when I first started editing, there's always, everyone has their own theories on TikTok, right? Like how to get on the For You page. And so for a while I was editing, you know, like 5 minutes of footage within TikTok, and that on its own was miserable. So then I started editing. Yeah, thank God I don't do that. So I moved over to InShot to edit most of my videos, and I've stuck with that. And initially I was like, the TikTok mic isn't very good for whatever reason on Android. It seems like everything on Android is just diminished with most mainstream apps. So I did end up just buying, you know, a decent microphone off Amazon during quarantine to, you know, step that up. And then the actual editing with like text overlay and all that, I stuck within TikTok for a while because I felt like that was enough for editing within TikTok, because I believed, you know, the hype. I'm like, I think maybe if I start editing outside of it, people aren't going to like it as much. I guess it wouldn't be the iconic text. And it was kind of miserable because you couldn't make, it's just not very fine tuned when you're trying to edit. I'm sure you dealt with the text overlays just constantly. Like you say, hey, 1.1 second, and then it ends up being like 1.7. And when you're making only a 15-second video, you know, that's a lot of time. And so fortunately with InShot, you can line it up so well. And then at first I just wanted, you know, cleaner text. I didn't want anything overlaying or anything like that. And then I'm like, wait, if I'm using any font I want within the app, why don't I use like fonts from the games, the movies and all that? And I'm like, so that was the next step. And then that was pretty much the final product. I think I settled on, well, so for a while I was editing my videos and I was doing like double speed. I'm like everything fast, fast, fast. And then finally, I think in March of this year, I settled on a final product where I do a slow motion shot of each pour. And then it's consistently like 1.8 seconds or something like that for every single one of those shots. So
very cool. Thanks
for
sharing.
Final.